Hello and welcome to Explore Classroom. My name is Gina Borgia, and I am so glad you are joining us today. At National Geographic, we believe in the power of exploration, wonder, and storytelling to change our world for the better. This Explore Classroom YouTube show connects students around the world with our National Geographic Explorers for short lessons and time for your questions. Today, our explorer is Lehua Kamalu. Lehua is a native Hawaiian captain who sails on historic Polynesian canoes. This means she uses methods of sailing passed down from person to person from long ago. She's been training for over 10 years to lead her own voyage and is the first woman to lead a long distance voyage when she sailed from Hawaii to California. Today, Lehua is going to share about wayfinding and why it matters so much when sailing long distances across the ocean. But first, I'd like to say a great big welcome to our viewers joining us today from around the globe. Our shout outs for today's episode go to Cascadia Montessori School, Armijo Elementary School, Blorlia Middle School, August Homeschool Group, St. Bernadette School, Fossil DLP, Hutchings Museum Institute, the Figliolini Homeschool, Pope Elementary School, Pearl City Elementary School, Voltaire High School, the Heritage School, St. Teresa School, North Kipling Junior Middle School, Museo Amparo, the X Venture Homeschoolers, Adele Yap, Jennifer Hoover's Homeschool, and the Metzger family. We are so thrilled to have you all here. And with that, let's get this Explorer Classroom started. It's time to turn it over to Lehua to share about Polynesian voyaging. Take it away.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to see everyone. Good morning. It is morning here where I am, and I'm happy to share a little bit about what I do as a National Geographic Explorer and an ocean captain and navigator. So I'm going to share a few images. We're going to go through a few of the ways that I use nature to find our way and some of the things that even you can practice wherever you live. So here we go. All right. Let's get this started. Now, some of these ideas, some of you have heard before. Some of you, this might be the first time you're hearing some of these concepts. Always good to hear a different way of looking at things, and hopefully it can help you better understand what we're talking about. So as a navigator, as a wayfinder, as someone who's trying to figure out which way to go and how to do it, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, where are we? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I am. This is the island I live on. It's called Oahu. And it is, this is a picture about 60 miles up in the sky. I don't think birds fly that high, but satellites for sure are way up there. So this is actually a satellite image looking down on the island I live on. And you'll see it's surrounded by water. We are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Oahu is one island of many islands. There's actually over 100 islands in the Hawaiian archipelago. These are just the 8 main ones that people live on, and certainly really popular for a lot of different things: surfing, sun. A lot of people like to come to vacation here, but you'll see they're very, very isolated. I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit more so you can see that all those Hawaiian islands actually sit in that little white box there in the middle of the Pacific. And to get an idea of other places that are in the Pacific, I'm going to show you a few other island groups and nations and archipelagos. There's actually over 25,000 islands in this ocean. So although it all looks blue and just like there's salt water everywhere, there are these little dots of, I would call, paradise. And each little island has different cultures, different languages, different plants and animals, and all sorts of things that we learn about as we explore and visit these places. When I was actually your age, I first learned about where all these islands were and a lot of the history about them. If none of these look familiar, some of you might recognize the name Tonga on the bottom of the screen. There was a really significant event that happened there a couple weeks ago, a volcanic eruption. So you'll see that's down there on the south side of the Pacific. All right. Now, many of you may be joining in from North America and the continental side. So for reference, if I'm over here in Hawaii, you might live near the Rocky Mountains or near the Gulf of Mexico. Maybe you're in Florida or Louisiana, maybe in Texas. You might live along the Mississippi River, the Great Lakes. Some of you may actually live closer to the North Pole if you're in Canada or Alaska. These are all natural features that help us find our way with things that are actually made in nature and that we can look around and see with our eyes. To get an idea of how far Hawaii is and how big this ocean is, for instance, we are over 2,000 miles away from that little dot there is actually Disneyland. I haven't been there in a very long time, but it is far. That is farther than if you were to go all the way across the United States from the West Coast to the East Coast. I've never walked across the whole United States, but I know it's far. But I have sailed from Hawaii to California, and it actually takes us 23 days to get there. So how do we get across the ocean? Now, there's no bridges, and let's just say we don't use an airplane to do this. We actually do something that the people who first inhabited Hawaii back over 1,000 years ago did to get here. Now we're looking back to a time before a lot of technology, before satellites, before Google Maps, really. So how did people get to Hawaii from where they came from? And here in Hawaii, all of our stories and migration come from a place called Tahiti in the South Pacific. So Hawaii's up there on the top, Tahiti's down there on the bottom. And there's 2,300 miles between these two places. So it's even farther than Hawaii is from California. And people made this journey over 1,000 years ago on vessels that look just like this. So this is the vessel I sail on. We call it a sailing canoe. And its name is Hokulea. That's a Hawaiian name. It means a star of gladness. And it's named after a star that rises directly above my head as I'm here in Hawaii. So it's really, really special canoe. And it has been sailing for almost 50 years. And it is built in the same style as old canoes and would have been what the canoes look like that carried people from Tahiti to Hawaii. This is another example of one of the canoes we have. This one is named Hikianalia. It has a little bit of a different design, but it sails in the same way. And you'll see canoes that look like this more commonly in the South Pacific. Now, for size reference, if you put two school buses, one in front of the other, that's roughly how large this canoe is. And it's about 40 to 45 feet tall off the surface of the water. Some features that you'll see that are similar between the two canoes is that they have these large triangle sails that are hoisted up on masts on top of the canoe. So these are both sailing vessels and they need the wind if they're going to be moving anywhere. So the wind works in a couple of ways. It can blow you in the direction you want to go. And it also does this really cool thing. When it passes across a sail, it almost creates like a suction that pulls you along your journey as well. So a lot of sailing is trying to balance the wind that's blowing you in the direction, sort of pushing you and pulling you. It's a really cool feature. Now back to this really long trip that was done historically, over 2,300 miles. And we sail when the wind is blowing roughly between 6 to 8 miles per hour. Now, if you've ridden in a car that's going 6 to 8 miles an hour, you know, it's going kind of slow. It's faster than walking, but it's not as fast as if you're just running as fast as you can. So if you were, say, jogging, you could probably jog just as fast as we sail. So a trip like this will take us 18 days to finish. So we sleep on board the canoe, we work on the canoe, we wash our clothes, we take showers, we do all those things while we're sailing. Now, another important thing to figure out is not just how the canoe moves from one place to another using the wind, but how we figure out what direction we're going in. So how did we find our way? Now, remember, we're going back to the early days, way long ago. So we don't have cell phones, computers, clocks, watches, satellites, lights, electricity, cars. None of that actually exists back then. We just have what nature is giving us. So if you've learned in geography maybe, or maybe this is the first time you're seeing it, one of the ways that people try to find their way is to sort of draw what I call imaginary maps or lines on the earth. And it helps us to figure out, okay, what square am I located in and where am I trying to go? Now, these lines don't actually exist on the earth. If I sail and I come across one of these lines. There's no line painted on the water. So these are all just sort of made up ways that help us find our way. You'll also realize when you're sailing on the ocean, there are no street signs. So if you're driving or you're walking along the sidewalk, you kind of know where you're going because there's might be a sign that says what road you're on. If you're trying to find a restaurant, hopefully it has a sign. It'd be really hard to find our way, right? If all the signs just disappeared overnight. And we don't really have those on the water, but we do have other signs. And this is a picture of me getting a sunburn, and I am looking in the direction of the sun. And what I do as a navigator is I spend my day and night looking out over the horizon to see what kind of signs nature can show me about which direction I'm going in. So this is a picture of what I'm looking at, and we'll see, it looks like there's a sun on the horizon above the water, sort of behind the clouds. And how do I know which way I'm going? If you're familiar with directions or cardinal points, we'll come back to my island. We do all this studying on land before we ever leave. So we do 90% of our work is studying and preparing before we leave. And you'll see we have north at the top, south at the bottom, west on the left, and east on the right. So we know on our island, the sun rises in the east and everywhere on the earth, and it sets over in the west. The same is true wherever we are in the ocean. We know that if the sun is coming up, that is direction of east. So as I'm looking out and I'm staring at the sun, I say, oh, there's the sunrise. I know that if I turn left, I'll be headed north. So this is me, I'm a little emoji there, and I'm staring at the sun on my island. I know that if the sun is over there, that north is going to be that way. The same is true. Let's say this wasn't the sunrise. Let's say this was actually the sunset. So the opposite would be true. So if I'm looking towards the setting sun, then if I turn left, I'm headed south. So I really need to know which one is which. So as example, if I'm facing west and the sun is setting, south would be to my left. Hopefully that makes sense. There's our little south facing sign. And of course, these signs, they aren't out there. I just sort of make them up in my head as I go and help me find my way. Another really important nature sign that we find at night are the stars. So I went outside a couple weeks ago and I took this picture above my house. That is a coconut tree in the corner over there. We have a lot of coconut trees over here. And hopefully you can see there's little tiny white dots. Those are the stars. They can be hard to see depending on where you live. You might live in a big city. You might live in a place where there's a lot of street lights and building lights. I can't actually ask everyone to turn off their lights at night. So sometimes I just have to work with what I have. But with the computer magic I have, I sort of turn down the lights of my city so that we can see the stars a little bit more clearly. At first, it might just look like a mix-up of stars. If you've done any stargazing, you might be able to see there's actually some really cool constellations already. I'm going to highlight them so you can see one that I particularly love. And these are the stars that make up a really special constellation. Constellations have different names depending on what part of the world you're in, what culture, what language you use. If you connect the lines of these stars that we found in the sky, they make a really interesting shape. Some would say it looks like a scorpion and that the hook on the bottom kind of looks like the tail of a scorpion. And it's called Scorpius. In Hawaiian, we have our own name for it. We call it Kamako Nui a Maui. That's a long name. And basically it means a fishhook of Maui. And Maui is a really important figure in history and legends here in Hawaii and around the Pacific Ocean. You may have heard of him in some movies that have come out recently. Another great way to study the stars, if you don't get to go outside at night a lot, or it's really hard to see them, or maybe there's clouds out, are planetariums. There are planetariums at the museum you can go to. There's also planetariums that you can download on your computer and look at, so you can study the stars without even having to go outside. I know it's been tricky to get outside a lot over the last couple of years, so a lot of us have really tried to keep up with our learning and connection to stars in this way. And stars and the sun are just two examples of nature signs that we can find. We don't have time to study all of them, but I did want to mention a few other ones that we can use. The moon that you see in the sky, really important. changing shape every day, and where it's located. The waves are super important, probably the most important thing, and really hard to understand because waves come in all directions and sizes. The clouds in the sky, what shapes they make, the colors that they have. These are all little details that if you kind of don't really pay attention to it, you don't realize clouds can come in orange or brown or black or green or blue, so many different colors. The wind blowing, what direction is it coming from? Does it always come from that direction? Is it in the same direction as the waves or the clouds above them? Really interesting things. One of our favorites, of course, are the ocean animals. So we know that ocean animals actually follow migration routes. Whales, they travel up to Alaska and Hawaii, depending on if it's summer or winter. They get to pick their favorite place to go. Dolphins as well have unique places in the ocean that they like to hang out. All of these things and more, including birds in the sky, we will use everything that nature shows us to find our direction. And we study all these things on land, and then we start to study them as we further venture out into the ocean. This is me and one of my dear friends, Tamiko, and we are on our way to California, and we're talking about the signs that we're looking at. And so every morning and night, we share, what did you see? What did I see? Did you see the wind blowing in this direction? Did you see the sunrise? Which way do we go to make sure we're on course to head to California? And then we actually have to steer the canoe. So this is actually the paddle that steers the whole canoe. It's very large. It's almost 300 pounds. And we take turns as crew members, making sure that once we find the star, the sun, the moon that's showing us our direction, we can actually steer our sailing vessel and our canoes in the direction we want to go. And as you can see, everyone's having a good time. We have a lot of fun out there. I'd mentioned a little bit about the dolphins and the whales as well. So if you were to take a camera and actually look underneath our canoe, you'll see some pretty incredible things. These dolphins actually followed us halfway to California, and they were playing around our canoe every morning that we woke up. So we get to see some pretty incredible creatures while we're out there. All right, so we talked about a little of where we are in Hawaii, where the Pacific is, some of the islands that you might find there, how people actually got from one island to another, and also some of the interesting signs that nature shows us to find our way. I'm sure you probably have a lot more questions about some of the details of how we do this, and I don't really want to take up much more time so that we can hear your questions about how we navigate, how we find our way, and anything else about exploring the Pacific and its islands.
All right, I know there are lots of other questions out there, but we have to kind of wrap it up. So we're going to end with the question that we ask all of our explorers. And do you have any general advice for the young explorers out there?
Oh, totally. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's just say whatever you're excited about doing right now, believe it or not, you'll probably still be excited about doing it when you're my age. So I only first learned about canoes and sailing, when I was in 3rd and 4th grade was the first time I saw the canoes. And I actually didn't get a chance to sail on them for probably another 10 or 15 years. But in that time, all the things I learned in school, I ended up using. I know that sounds crazy, but I studied a lot of math, a lot of history, a lot of geography, and these things actually help me better understand the Pacific Ocean that I sail in today. I'd say if you want to learn more about figuring out where you are, you can just start with what's going on right outside your window, right outside your house, outside your school. You don't have to go very far. And in fact, you don't even need all those little tools we talked about, like your phone and your computer and all these little pieces. You can actually just observe and see what's going on. How are birds behaving? How are clouds behaving? What kind of shapes do you see? So however curious you are about it is really what drives your training. For me, I think, you mentioned I've been practicing doing this for 10 years now, and it's all guided by what I feel like studying. Today, if I look at the sun, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't realize it does that. I'll work on that. And, obviously I have to do my work and all my other homework as well. So whatever you're curious about learning, totally go into it. And you have all the tools actually kind of right here to figure it out. So definitely take that with you. Even if you're nowhere near the ocean, these are the same kind of signs that you can learn on land or in the mountains to help you find your way. So hopefully you got excited about a few of those ideas and a few more questions in your mind that we haven't answered that you can absolutely keep answering on your own.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lehua, for being here with us to share about your amazing work. And thank you to all the students out there. We appreciate all of your thoughtful questions, and to the teachers, of course, for making these events possible for your students. And I hope you join many more of our events. We are here every Thursday at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern. We have lots of exciting things coming your way, from plant genetics to diving to explore shipwrecks, to geology and the ecology of air plants. Lots of cool stuff. You can register your student group for a shout out during the event and a chance to be on screen at natgeoed.org/explorerclassroom. I hope you have a great day, everyone. Stay